The boy's bare feet hit the burning asphalt, and he didn't stop running. He couldn't. His arms shook under the weight of his baby sister, her head limp against his chest, her lips cracked and pale in the Arizona heat. Cars roared past him one after another, not a single one slowed. He screamed until his voice broke open like dry earth. "Don't leave me! Somebody, please don't leave me!" Nobody stopped, until a Harley-Davidson engine dropped from a thunder to a low, uncertain growl, and then went silent. If this story moves you, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The highway didn't care about children. That was the first thing Stone Mercer had learned about the world, long before he ever put on a cut, long before he earned the patches that once made men step aside when he walked into a room. The road didn't care. The desert didn't care. And the people driving through both of them in their air-conditioned trucks and their rental sedans sure as hell didn't care either. He had known that truth so long it had stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like weather. Just the way things were. He was 300 miles into a solo ride from Flagstaff to nowhere in particular when he saw the boy. At first, Stone's brain tried to make it into something else. A plastic bag caught in a heat shimmer. A dog. Some piece of roadside debris tumbling across the asphalt. Because his brain, after 52 years of hard use and harder choices, had learned to file unusual things into safe categories before his heart could get involved. His heart had caused him nothing but trouble. But then the shape moved with intention. Small arms pumping. A head turning back over one shoulder checking for something behind it. And the way the arms were crossed at the chest, not running freely, the way a child runs toward something good, but clutched tight, holding something precious, protecting it with every step. Stone didn't decide to slow down. His right hand just eased off the throttle. The Harley dropped from 80 to 60 to 40, and by the time the boy's face came into clear view, red contorted, streaming with tears, and something else, something that looked older than crying, something that looked like pure, desperate terror. Stone had already pulled onto the gravel shoulder and killed the engine. He sat there for 2 full seconds, one boot on the ground, the heat rising off the asphalt in visible waves, and he watched a 6-year-old boy stagger toward him, carrying what looked like a bundle of rags. Except the bundle moved. Except the bundle had tiny fingers. "Hey!" Stone's voice came out rougher than he intended. 12 years of near silence will do that to a man. "Hey kid, stop." The boy stopped. Not because Stone told him to. Stone could see that clearly. He stopped because his legs finally gave him permission to. His knees buckled slightly, and he caught himself swaying, squinting up at the man on the motorcycle with an expression that was 1 part desperate hope and 3 parts absolute certainty that hope was about to be taken away again. "You got water," the boy said. His voice was a wreck, scraped raw, like someone had taken sandpaper to his vocal cords from the inside. "She needs water, please. She stopped crying a while ago, and I don't know what that means, but I think it means something bad." Stone was already off the bike. He didn't think about it. He didn't calculate it. He didn't run through the list of reasons this was not his problem and not his responsibility, and not the kind of situation a man like him walked into voluntarily. He just moved the way a body moves when something deeper than reason takes over, and he was kneeling in the gravel in front of the boy before he'd even fully registered that he'd dismounted. The bundle in the boy's arms was a baby girl. She couldn't have been more than 12, maybe 14 months old. Her skin had gone from whatever color it should have been to something dry and papery, with a faint flush across both cheeks that Stone recognized immediately, because he'd seen it before on men in the desert, on men who'd pushed past the point of asking for help and into the territory where the body starts making decisions on its own. She was burning with fever. Her breathing was shallow, catching irregularly like an engine misfiring. "How long?" Stone said. He was already unstrapping the water bottle from the side of his pack. "How long since she had water?" "I don't know what time it is." The boy's chin was trembling, but his eyes were steady. That combination hit Stone somewhere behind the sternum. "Yesterday morning, I think. Maybe before. She kept crying at first, and then she got quieter, and now she's..." The boy's voice broke. He pulled it back together with a visible physical effort, the way someone grabs a rope to keep from going over an edge. Is she dying? Stone looked at the baby. He looked at the boy. He said, "What's your name?" "Caleb? Caleb Walker." "She's Lily. She's my sister." "How old are you, Caleb?" 6, 6.5. A beat. "Does that matter?" "No." Stone twisted open the water bottle. "Hold her head up a little. Just a little. Don't tilt her back." "I know," Caleb said with a quiet dignity that had no business living in the voice of a 6-year-old. "I've been holding her right. I've been careful." Stone believed him. That was the thing, he believed him completely. Because the way the boy held that baby wasn't the way a child holds something. It was the way someone holds the last thing they have left. Stone got a few drops of water past Lily's lips. The baby stirred. Not much, a faint flutter of eyelids, a barely audible sound that was less than a cry, but more than silence. Caleb made a sound beside him that Stone would spend a long time trying to describe and never quite manage. It wasn't relief. It wasn't happiness. It was more like the sound a person makes when they've been holding their breath for so long they'd forgotten breathing was something that could still happen. "She moved," Caleb whispered. "She moved," Stone confirmed. He kept working. Small amounts of water. Patient intervals. His hands, which had done things he did not like to think about, were steady and careful in a way that surprised even him. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice that sounded like his own from 30 years ago said, "You remember how to do this." And he did. He did remember. There had been a time a long time ago, buried under everything that came after, when Stone Mercer had known how to be gentle. "Where did you come from?" he asked, keeping his voice level, keeping the alarm out of it. "How did you get out here?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. Not a child's silence. Not the silence of someone deciding whether to lie. This was the silence of someone deciding where the story actually starts. Because the story Stone could already tell did not start on this highway. "We were in a motel," Caleb said finally. "Outside of Tucson. Me and Lily and our mom." "Where's your mom now?" Another silence. Longer. The kind that contains something that cannot be said quickly, because saying it quickly would make it too real, too fast. "She got sick," Caleb said. "She'd been sick for a while. She kept saying she was fine, but I could tell she wasn't, because she stopped eating, and she was sweating at night, even when she said she was cold." He paused. "She died 3 days ago. I think 3 days. I stopped counting." Stone sat back on his heels. The heat pressed down on both of them. A semi roared past on the highway without slowing. "She died in the motel room." "Yeah." Caleb looked down at Lily, adjusting his grip slightly, redistributing the weight with the automatic precision of someone who had been carrying this particular weight for a very long time. "I didn't know what to do. I couldn't call anyone because—" He stopped. "Because why? Because of Dale." Stone kept his voice neutral. "Who's Dale?" The boy's jaw tightened. 6 years old, and his jaw tightened with something that Stone could only call controlled fury. The kind of fury that's been compressed into a very small space for a very long time. "He's the man Mom was scared of," Caleb said. "He knew where we were. He'd been looking for us. Mom said if we called anyone official, Dale would find out. She said Dale had people everywhere." He looked up at Stone directly for the first time. His eyes were an unusual shade, not quite brown, not quite green, some color that existed at the border between the two. "I don't know if that's true, but Mom believed it, so I believed it too." Stone was quiet for a moment, turning this over. Then, "So you ran?" "I took Lily and I ran. I took the formula Mom had left and the diapers, and I walked out the back of the motel, and I went to the highway, and I just walked." A pause. "I thought someone would stop. I thought it would take like an hour. It's been—" He counted something on his fingers, his lips moving. "It's been 2 days. I walked all night the first night because I was scared Dale would find us." 2 days, Stone said very quietly. "I slept under a bridge for a few hours. And I kept Lily covered. I kept her out of the sun. I did everything right." The last sentence came out with an edge of desperation on it. Not a child asking for praise, but a person needing to know that the outcome was not his fault. That he had done everything a person could do. Stone looked at this boy. This 6-year-old boy who had watched his mother die, who had taken his infant sister and walked alone across the Arizona desert for 2 days, who had done everything right, and whose sister was still dying in his arms on a highway where no one stopped. Something happened inside Stone Mercer's chest. Something that had been sealed off for a very long time made a sound like a lock turning. "Okay," Stone said. He stood up. He pulled off his riding jacket, the good one, the leather one, the one he'd had for 15 years, and he held it out. "Wrap Lily in this. Keep her against your chest. The leather holds heat, but it'll protect her from the sun." Caleb stared at the jacket for a moment. "That's yours." "Yeah. It looks expensive." "It is. I might get it dirty." Stone almost laughed. He didn't because there wasn't quite room for it yet, but the impulse was there and it surprised him. "Wrap her up, Caleb." Caleb wrapped her up. His small hands worked the jacket around Lily with that same quiet competence, and Stone watched him and felt the lock in his chest turn another notch. "Where are we going?" Caleb asked. "Copper Ridge is about 14 miles up the road. There's a diner there, and they'll have a phone, and we're going to call for medical help for Lily." Stone looked at him. "Can you ride on a motorcycle?" Caleb considered this with the gravity of a man reviewing terms of a contract. "I never have, but I can learn fast." "I know you can." Stone paused. "I'm going to put you on in front of me, and I need you to hold Lily between us. Can you do that?" "Yes." "You sure?" "I've been carrying her for 2 days," Caleb said with quiet, unshakable pride. "I can carry her 14 more miles." The Harley fired up with its low, rolling thunder. Caleb sat in front of Stone on the tank, Lily cradled between them, wrapped in $1,500 worth of black leather. Stone's arms went around both of them as he took the handlebars, and for a moment, just a moment, he sat there without moving, because the weight of them, the small specific living weight of 2 children against his chest and arms, was something he was entirely unprepared for. Then he pulled onto the highway and rode. Chunk. The Copper Ridge Diner materialized out of the heat haze like a promise being kept after a very long delay. 2 gas pumps, a hand-painted sign, a screen door that hadn't closed properly in years. Stone had been through this town maybe a dozen times over the decades, and had never stopped because stopping meant the possibility of being known, and being known meant the possibility of being remembered, and being remembered was a luxury he'd been unable to afford for most of his adult life. He stopped now. He had the bike on the kickstand, and Caleb off the seat before the engine finished ticking down, and he was through the screen door with both children before the woman behind the counter had finished registering that a customer had walked in. "I need your phone," Stone said. "Now. And water. Clean water, a cup, and something soft I can dip in it." The woman behind the counter, mid-50s, reading glasses, pushed up on her forehead an expression that had clearly weathered a significant quantity of unusual. Looked at Stone, then at the baby in his arms, then at the boy standing behind him with the focused calm of a small general. "What happened?" she said. "Phone first," Stone said. "Questions after." Her name was Ruth. Stone would learn that later. Right now, she moved with a speed and efficiency that he recognized as the particular competence of someone who has seen real emergencies and knows that the time for questions is after the emergency and not during it. Phone on the counter, glass of water beside it. A clean dish towel, wet folded. Stone handed Lily to Caleb. "Hold her exactly like you have been, you're doing it right," and picked up the phone. He called 911. He had not called 911 in his adult life. There was a version of Stone Mercer that would have found a way around it, would have found some other channel, some sideways path that kept official voices out of his business. But Lily was making that misfiring engine sound again, and Caleb was watching him with those border-colored eyes, and there was no sideways path here. There was only the fastest way to get a 12-month-old child to medical attention. 911, what's your emergency? I have a baby approximately 12 months old, severe dehydration, and high fever, unresponsive. He gave the address Ruth provided in a low voice at his elbow. I also have a 6-year-old boy. Both children have been in the desert for 2 days. We need an ambulance immediately. Can you tell me what happened? I just told you what happened. How long for the ambulance? Sir, I need to. How long? A pause. 12 to 15 minutes. Thank you. He hung up. He turned back to find Caleb standing at the counter, Lily in his arms, watching him with an expression that was difficult to interpret. Not quite trust. Not yet. Something more cautious than trust. Something that was the seed of trust under about 3 inches of very reasonable protective frost. They're coming, Caleb said. 12 minutes, Stone said. Maybe less. Ruth appeared at Stone's elbow with a plate she'd assembled in about 90 seconds. Crackers, a few slices of cheese, a cup of cold water. She set it in front of Caleb without ceremony. You eat that, she said in the tone of a woman who is not making a suggestion. All of it. Caleb sat down at the counter stool. He picked up a cracker. He ate with the controlled urgency of someone who is extremely hungry but has decided that visible desperation is no longer appropriate. Stone sat one stool away and watched him eat. The man, Stone said quietly. Dale, did he see you leave the motel? Caleb chewed, swallowed. I don't know. I went out the back, through the bathroom window. He picked up another cracker. I was quiet. 6-year-old going through a bathroom window carrying a baby, Stone said. That's not easy. The window wasn't that small. A pause. Lily was asleep. I used the pillowcase from the motel, like a sling. He glanced at Stone sideways, gauging his reaction. I saw it in a video once. Stone said nothing for a moment. Then, you improvised a baby carrier out of a pillowcase. Yeah. And walked 2 days across the desert. Yeah. Another sideways look, slightly more direct this time. I know you think I'm just a kid. I don't think that, Stone said. Most people do. Most people are wrong. Ruth was at the far end of the counter now, keeping her distance, making the subtle adjustments of a person who understands that some conversations require space. But Stone caught her glancing over. She had that look he'd seen before in people who'd grown up in small places, the look of someone cataloging details with patient, accurate attention. She was looking at his arms, at the edges of the tattoos visible below his rolled sleeve. He didn't try to cover them. Outside, the ambulance sirens started, still distant, but getting louder, that approaching wail that sounds like the world has decided to finally pay attention. Caleb heard it. His whole body reacted not with relief exactly, but with the kind of tension that comes just before you allow yourself to feel relief when you're still holding off in case it turns out not to be real. That's for Lily, Stone said. I know. Caleb looked down at his sister in his arms. He pressed his lips to the top of her head, not a theatrical gesture, not performed for anyone, just a private moment that Stone happened to witness. I told you I'd get you help, Caleb whispered to her. I told you. Lily's eyes fluttered. She made a sound thin and rough and absolutely undeniably alive, and Caleb's breath came out of him in a long, shaking exhale. And Stone Mercer, a man who had last cried at his own mother's funeral in 1997 and had not come close since, felt something gather at the corners of his eyes and had to look at the ceiling for a moment. Ruth appeared with more water and did not comment on the ceiling inspection. Bow. The ambulance pulled up outside, and 2 paramedics came through the door, moving with the focused speed of people who have a job to do and intend to do it correctly. The younger one reached for Lily. Caleb's arms tightened instinctively. It's okay, the paramedic said, using the specific gentle tone trained into people who deal regularly with frightened children. I'm going to take care of her, I promise. You can't promise that, Caleb said. The paramedic blinked. This was apparently not the usual response. "He's right," Stone said from behind Caleb. "Don't tell him what you can't guarantee. Tell him what you can do." The paramedic looked at Stone. Something shifted in his expression, a brief recalibration. Then he looked back at Caleb. "I'm trained specifically to help babies who are dehydrated and sick. I have everything I need in that ambulance to start helping her in the next 2 minutes. I will not leave her side until she's in the hospital and being taken care of." Caleb looked at Stone. Stone gave the smallest nod. Caleb released his sister. The paramedic moved immediately efficiently, and with what Stone could only describe as genuine tenderness. And watching this. Watching a stranger handle Lily with actual care. Watching Caleb track every movement with those exhausted, vigilant eyes. Stone felt that locked thing in his chest turn open a little more. The second paramedic was checking Caleb's temperature pulse. The soles of his feet, which Stone had not looked at and now saw, were cut and blistered in ways that made him have to breathe very deliberately through his nose. "He walked 2 days, Stone said to the paramedic. "Barefoot some of it, I think." "Most of it," Caleb admitted quietly. "My shoes gave me blisters, so I took them off. Then I lost one." The paramedic looked at the boy's feet and did not allow his expression to change, but something moved through his eyes. "Okay, buddy. We're going to get those taken care of. Can you walk to the ambulance, or would you like me to carry you?" "I can walk," Caleb said. He stood. He was clearly in pain. Stone could see it in the careful way he placed each foot, but he walked. Head up, back straight. 6 years old, and he walked across that diner floor like someone who had decided long ago that being carried was something he did not do. At the door he stopped, turned back. "Are you coming?" he said to Stone. Stone looked at the boy in the doorway, at the ambulance beyond him, at the paramedics waiting, at what came after ambulances, hospitals, systems, questions, officials, the particular world of institutions that had made Stone Mercer's acquaintance in ways he would rather forget. He thought about 12 years of riding solo, of waking up in cheap motels and moving before he could accumulate the weight of being known anywhere, of the very careful, very deliberate life he had constructed around the principle that other people's problems were other people's problems. "Yeah," he said. "I'm coming." He followed the boy out the door. The emergency room at Mercy General in Copper Ridge was small county hospital, 2 trauma bays. The particular lighting of a place that operates on realistic budgets and the dedication of people who chose this work anyway. By the time they arrived, Lily had already been moved into the care of a pediatric nurse named Donna, who had the kind of calm, precise competence that Stone found immediately reassuring. He stood in the corridor while Caleb was being treated in the adjacent bay. IV fluids wound, care on those feet, the business of rehydrating a body that had been pushed to its limit. He could hear them talking through the curtain. Caleb answering questions in that same even voice. The nurse occasionally making small sounds of what Stone identified as professional concern, carefully contained. A doctor materialized beside him, young, tired, good eyes. "You're with the children," the doctor said. Stone thought about how to answer that. "I found them, on the highway. I brought them in." "Do you know their family?" "I know what the boy told me. Mother died 3 days ago. No other family named. There's a man, he said the name Dale, who the mother was apparently frightened of. That's the extent of it." The doctor wrote something down. "We're going to need to contact Child Protective Services." Stone said nothing. "It's protocol," the doctor said, reading his silence accurately. "I know what it is," Stone said. "Is there something?" "No," Stone said. "No, there's nothing. Do what you need to do." The doctor moved on. Stone stayed where he was, back against the wall, arms folded, watching the curtain behind which Caleb was being treated. He thought about the word protocol, about the systems that existed for situations like this, about the fact that those systems, whatever their intentions, operated according to categories, and that 2 children without living parents fell into a very specific category. Separated. The word formed in his mind, and he didn't like the shape of it. Through the curtain, Caleb said something Stone couldn't quite hear. And then clearly, "Where's Stone?" The nurse said something low. "I need to know where Stone is," Caleb said. His voice was still that controlled, even voice, but something underneath it was beginning to fray. "He said he was coming." Stone pushed off the wall and pushed through the curtain. "I'm here," he said. Caleb was sitting on the treatment table, one foot being wrapped an IV line running into the back of his hand. He looked at Stone with that same border-colored gaze, and this time the frost was a little thinner. Just slightly. Just enough. "I thought you left," Caleb said. "I said I was coming." People say things. Stone pulled a chair from the corner and sat down beside the table without being invited, because it seemed like the kind of moment where invitations were beside the point. "Yeah," he said. "They do. I'm still here." Caleb looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the nurse who was wrapping his foot. Then he looked back at Stone. "They're going to take us somewhere," he said. "Lily and me, aren't they?" It wasn't a question. The boy had already worked it out. "There's going to be a process," Stone said carefully. "I know what the process is," Caleb said. "It means someone comes and decides where we go, and they split us up. That's what they do." He said it flatly, without drama, the way you state a thing you know to be true from experience. "That's what happened to Marcus at school. His parents died, and they split him and his brother up. Marcus cried for a whole year." Stone said nothing. "I'm not going to let that happen to Lily," Caleb said. "I walked 2 days across the desert to make sure nobody separates us. I'm not stopping now." The nurse had finished wrapping his foot. She stood up and gave Stone a look over Caleb's head, not accusatory, but weighted. The kind of look that means whatever you do next matters. Stone looked at the boy. At this 6-year-old who had survived 2 days in the desert, who had improvised a baby carrier from a motel pillowcase, who had bit a grown man at a gas station and run until his legs gave out, who held his dying sister with the care of a parent and the dignity of a soldier, who had not asked a single person in his life for anything except the one thing he could not survive without. "Don't leave me." Stone put his hand on the table beside Caleb's hand. Not on it, beside it. An offer, not an imposition. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Caleb looked at the hand beside his. Then he reached out and put his own hand on top of it. Neither of them said anything. Down the hall in the trauma bay, the machines beside Lily's bed beeped with the steady, reliable rhythm of a body deciding to stay. And Stone Mercer, a man who had spent 12 years riding away from everything, sat in a plastic chair in a county emergency room with a 6-year-old boy's hand on top of his, and felt for the first time in longer than he could account for that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He didn't know yet what was coming. He didn't know about Margaret Thornton, who would arrive the following morning with her clipboard and her institutional certainty and her plan to separate the children before the week was out. He didn't know about the sheriff who would run his name and go very quiet when the results came back. He didn't know that his past, the cuts, the patches, the years he had spent in the company of men who did things that could not be taken back, was about to walk into this hospital corridor and try to undo everything he had stumbled into doing right. He didn't know any of that yet. He just sat in the chair. He stayed. He stayed through the night. That was the first thing Stone Mercer did that surprised everyone in that hospital, including himself. The plastic chair did not get more comfortable. The corridor did not get quieter. The fluorescent lights did not dim at any point to acknowledge that human beings required darkness to properly rest. None of that changed. Stone stayed anyway. Around 2 in the morning, a night shift nurse named Priya stopped in front of him with a cup of coffee and the particular look of a person who has seen every variety of waiting room inhabitant and has made a genuine assessment. "You're not family," she said. Not accusatory, just accurate. "No," Stone said. "You could go home. We have your contact information. We'll call if anything changes with the baby." "I'm not leaving." Priya looked at him for another moment. Then she set the coffee on the chair beside him and walked away without another word. That was the kind of person she was. Stone noted it and was grateful in a way he did not know how to express. At 3:15, Caleb appeared in the corridor doorway. He was in a hospital gown IV pole beside him, feet wrapped in clean white bandaging, and he had clearly been told to stay in his room, and had clearly decided that staying in his room was not something he intended to do. He looked down the corridor, found Stone in the chair, and his shoulders dropped approximately half an inch, the specific physical release of a body that has been braced for something and found it unnecessary. "You're still here," Caleb said. "I told you I would be." Caleb walked to the chair beside Stone and sat down. He pulled his knees up and wrapped his arms around them and looked at the wall across the corridor. After a moment he said, "Lily's breathing better. I can hear the monitor. It changed." "I heard it too," Stone said. "Good change or bad change?" "Good change. It evened out. That's what you want." Caleb absorbed this. Then, "How do you know what a monitor's supposed to sound like?" Stone drank his coffee. "I've spent time in hospitals." "Were you sick?" "Other people were." Caleb looked at him sideways. "Who?" Stone was quiet for a moment. He was not by nature or practice a man who answered personal questions. He had spent the better part of 2 decades perfecting the art of the deflection, the subject change, the particular silence that communicated, that's not available, without requiring words. But at 3 in the morning, in a hospital corridor, with this boy sitting beside him in a paper gown, that particular skill felt like the wrong tool. "My mother," Stone said. "A long time ago." Caleb nodded slowly. "Did she make it?" "No." "I'm sorry." Stone looked at him. "You're 6 years old." "I know what it's like," Caleb said simply. "To lose your mom." He said it the way you say something that has already been processed, at least partially, not raw, not bleeding, but real. Weight without chaos. Stone said nothing, because there was nothing to say to that. The boy was right. He did know what it was like. They sat in silence for a while, and it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of 2 people who have established, without formality, that they are on the same side of something. Then Caleb said, "I should tell you about the gas station." Stone set down his coffee cup. He had been waiting for this. Not impatiently, but he'd known since the highway that the story Caleb had given him was a summary. That there were chapters inside it that the boy had not yet opened. The gas station had come up once and then been passed over, and Stone had let it pass because the immediate emergency had required everything. But now Lily was breathing evenly in the next room, and Caleb was awake at 3 in the morning and had clearly decided that the story needed to be told. "Tell me," Stone said. Caleb unwrapped his arms from his knees and stretched them out in front of him, looking at his wrapped feet. "It was the first night. I'd been walking maybe 4 hours and Lily was crying and I ran out of formula. I had 2 bottles and I'd been so careful, but she finished the second one and she was still crying and..." He stopped, breathed, continued. "I saw the gas station lights from the road. I thought if I could just get inside, get some formula, get water, it would be okay. Did you have money?" "Mom had $23 in her jacket pocket. I took it before I left." He paused. "I know that was hers." "She didn't need it anymore," Stone said. "You did. That's what money is for." Caleb looked at him quickly, as if checking whether this was a real absolution or a polite one. Something in Stone's face apparently satisfied him because he continued. "There was a man outside the gas station, big, sitting on the hood of a truck. He saw me come up the road and he stood up in a way I didn't like. The way people stand up when they've been waiting for something." Stone was very still. "He said my name," Caleb said. "He said, 'Hey, you're Caleb, right? I know your mom. She sent me to come get you.'" He paused. "She was dead. She'd been dead for almost 2 days by then. She didn't send anyone." "What did you do?" "I kept walking. Toward the door. I didn't run because I thought maybe if I ran, he'd grab me. So I walked like I believed him. Like I was going to go with him." Caleb's voice was level. "He came around to walk beside me, and when he reached out to take my arm, I bit him. As hard as I could. I bit his hand and I ran." Stone breathed out slowly through his nose. "He chased me," Caleb said. But I got into the gas station, and there was a woman at the register, and I went behind the counter and grabbed onto her and said, 'Don't let that man take me,' and she—" He paused. "She was good. She was a good person. She locked the door. She called 911. But then I got scared because 911 meant police, and if Dale knew where we were—" He stopped again, looked at Stone directly. "Was that stupid running from the police?" "No," Stone said. "You were following your mother's instructions, and your mother was protecting you. You didn't know who to trust. That's not stupid." "I went out the back before they came," Caleb said. "I took formula and diapers from the shelf. I left the $23 on the counter." Stone stared at him. "You stole supplies to survive and paid for them on the way out." "It wasn't mine to take without paying," Caleb said, as if this were completely obvious. Stone picked up his coffee again. He needed something to do with his hands. He had spent many years in the company of men who operated by codes of conduct that were fierce and absolute and entirely self-serving, and in all that time, he had never once met anyone whose moral architecture was as clean and unambiguous as this 6-year-old's. "Caleb," he said, "I need to ask you something important." "Okay. This man, Dale, did your mother ever describe him to you? What he does? Why she was afraid of him?" Caleb was quiet for the long moment. His hands came together in his lap, fingers interlaced a gesture that looked adult and considered. "She said he was dangerous. She said he had done something to her a long time ago, and that when she tried to get away, he kept finding her. She moved us 3 times, 3 different cities." He looked at Stone. "She never said what he did. I think she was trying to protect me from knowing. Smart woman. She was." A pause that carried weight. "She was really smart. She got sick, and she couldn't fight it and keep running at the same time." Stone looked at the ceiling. He thought about a woman sick, frightened, alone, running from something with 2 children and $23, who had managed to raise a boy with the internal compass of a trained operative, who had instilled in him somehow, in between the running and the hiding, and the fear, the understanding that you pay for what you take, that you don't lie to get what you want, that you protect the people smaller than you, even when everything is falling apart. He thought that he would very much have liked to meet her. "What was her name?" he asked. Caleb looked at him. His eyes went quiet in a way that was different from any other quiet Stone had seen in him. This was the private quiet, the one that didn't have words assigned to it yet. "Anna," he said. Her name was Anna. Joe. Morning arrived with the particular efficiency of hospital mornings, which acknowledge no gradual transitions and tolerate no sleeping past 6. Lily was moved out of the immediate crisis bay and into a monitored room, which was the hospital's way of saying, "She is no longer dying, she is now healing," and that distinction mattered in a way that Stone felt somewhere he couldn't name. Caleb was allowed to sit beside her bed. Stone stood in the doorway and watched the boy take his sister's hand. Tiny fingers around tiny fingers, and talk to her in a low, continuous murmur, not asking her anything, not needing her to respond, just filling the air around her with the familiar sound of his voice, the way you keep a fire going to remind the dark that it hasn't won yet. Ruth from the diner had called the hospital at 7:30. Stone had not given her the hospital name, but Copper Ridge had one hospital, so the math wasn't complicated. She had apparently told the intake desk that she was sending food, and a bag appeared at 8, with 2 sandwiches, a container of soup, a juice box, and a note that said, "Only room 12." R. Stone ate 1 sandwich, standing in the corridor. Caleb ate the other one beside Lily's bed, without taking his eyes off his sister. The social worker arrived at 9:47. Stone had known she was coming. He had been waiting for the specific click of institutional heels on a linoleum floor, and when he heard it, he straightened against the wall and watched her come down the corridor. Margaret Thornton was not a villain. That was the first and most important thing Stone understood when he saw her, because he had spent enough time with actual villains to know the difference. She was a woman in her mid-50s, a gray blazer, a lanyard with 3 different ID badges, and the expression of someone who has processed more tragedy than any person should and has built a professional shell around it, thick enough to get through the day. Her hair was pulled back with the precision of someone who had decided long ago that personal presentation was a form of control in environments where other things could not be controlled. She had a clipboard, she had a plan, and she had the weight of the state of Arizona behind her. She stopped in front of Stone. "You're the individual who brought the children in?" "Yes." "And your relationship to the children is?" "None," Stone said. "I found them on the highway." She wrote something down. "I see. We appreciate your assistance in getting them to safety. At this point, the department will be taking responsibility for what exactly?" She looked up from the clipboard. "For determining appropriate placement for both children pending a full assessment of their situation and any available family." "There's no available family," Stone said. "The mother is dead. The boy told me there's no one else." "We conduct our own assessment," she said. Not unkindly. Not warmly either. The voice of procedure. "I understand that," Stone said. "I'm asking what the timeline is." "These things take time." "How much time?" She studied him for a moment. "Are you intending to make a claim for custody or guardianship of these children?" The question landed in the corridor like something dropped from a height. Stone looked at her. He thought about 12 years of riding solo. He thought about Anna Walker, who had run 3 times and died at 30-something in a motel room with $23 in her jacket. He thought about Caleb's hand on his in the emergency room. "I don't know what I'm intending," Stone said carefully. "I know that the boy has asked me not to leave. I know that he is terrified of being separated from his sister, and I know that whatever the department's process is, it should not ignore what that child needs in order to follow a checklist." She looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Mercer. Mr. Mercer, I've been doing this work for 21 years. I understand that you have formed an attachment to these children, and that this experience has been emotional. But my responsibility is their long-term welfare, not their short-term comfort." "Their long-term welfare," Stone said, keeping his voice even, "starts with their short-term survival. And that boy's survival right now is contingent on not being ripped away from the only person he trusts." She wrote something else on her clipboard. "I'll need your full name, date of birth, and current address." Stone gave them to her. He watched her write down his name. He watched the small pause, barely perceptible half a second when she completed it. She had not recognized it yet, but she would. She went into the room to speak with Caleb. Stone stayed in the doorway. He watched Caleb hear her out. Watched the boy's expression move through several phases. In about 30 seconds, the controlled stillness he defaulted to, followed by a tightening around the eyes when she said something Stone couldn't hear, followed by the thing Stone had been bracing for. The boy turning to look at the doorway, to confirm Stone was still there. He was still there. Caleb turned back to the social worker and said something that made her pause mid-sentence. Stone would find out later that what he said was, "I'm not going anywhere without Stone." The sheriff arrived at 11. His name was Briggs, and he was the kind of man who wore his authority in the set of his shoulders, rather than in any particular expression on his face. Comfortable with it, habituated to it, not unkind, but not soft either. He came through the corridor with the unhurried walk of someone who has already made most of his decisions before entering a room. He stopped in front of Stone and said, "Mr. Mercer, mind if we talk?" "Go ahead," Stone said. Briggs had a printout. Stone could see it folded in his hand, and he knew what was on it. The same way you know what's in a letter before you open it. Not because you have any special information, but because you know your own history. "You have quite a record," Briggs said. Not with hostility. With the particular tone of a careful man reviewing facts. "I know what I have," Stone said. "Hell's Angels, Arizona chapter, affiliated from 1991 to 2007. Briggs glanced at the sheet. Assault, possession, conspiracy charges that were eventually dropped, a restraining order from 2003 that expired. He looked up. Then nothing. 16 years of nothing. People change, Stone said. Some do, Briggs said. He looked at Stone for a long moment. Here's my question, Mr. Mercer, and I want you to understand, I'm asking it straight, because I think you're a man who appreciates straight. What exactly is your interest in these two children? Stone looked at him. He thought about how to answer that. He had been thinking about how to answer that since 3 in the morning when Caleb had sat beside him in the corridor and said, I know what it's like, and something had broken open that Stone had spent considerable energy keeping sealed. The boy asked me not to leave, Stone said. I told him I wouldn't. That's it. That's the whole thing. Briggs folded the printout and put it in his breast pocket. He looked at Stone with the unhurried patience of a man who has interviewed many people over many years and knows the difference between a lie told confidently and a truth told simply. You were a violent man, Briggs said. I was. Past tense. Past tense. What changed? Stone was quiet for a moment. He looked at the door of the room where Caleb sat beside Lily's bed, still holding her hand, still talking to her in that low, continuous murmur. The wrong thing stopped mattering, he said, and I ran out of reasons to pretend otherwise. Briggs looked at the door too. Then he said, I'm going to verify your current status and residence. You're not to leave the county until I've done that. I wasn't planning to. Briggs nodded. This boy, he said almost as an aside. The social worker says he refused to discuss placement unless you were present for the conversation. I heard. Seems like you made an impression. He made one on me, Stone said. Briggs left without further commentary. Margaret Thornton reappeared at the door to Lily's room with her clipboard and an expression that had shifted fractionally from procedural to something more complex. She looked at Stone. He wants to talk to you, she said. Both of us. Stone went into the room. Caleb was sitting on the edge of the bed, Lily asleep behind him, monitor steady. He looked at Stone, and then at Margaret Thornton, and then back at Stone with the expression of someone who has been preparing a statement and is ready to deliver it. I need to say something, Caleb said. Go ahead, Stone said. She says the system will find a good home for us. He looked at Margaret. I believe that you believe that. I'm not saying you're lying, but I need you to understand something. He straightened his back. 12 months of living crises had built a spine in this boy that a decade of normal couldn't have. Lily doesn't know anyone in the world except me. I am the only person whose voice she knows. I am the only person she's used to falling asleep near. If you put us with strangers, she won't understand what happened. She's 1 year old. She doesn't have language. She only has familiar. And if you take familiar away from her right now, when she's already sick, when she's already scared... He stopped. His voice had developed a tremor. He pushed through it. Then you're not protecting her. You're hurting her. And you're going to have to explain to yourself how that's different from what Dale does. The room was very quiet. Margaret Thornton had been doing this for 21 years and had heard many things in rooms like this one. Stone could see her processing what she'd just heard. The clipboard was at her side, not in front of her. That was a small but real thing. I hear what you're saying, Caleb, she said finally. I need you to do more than hear it, Caleb said. Stone looked at the boy, at the absolute clear-eyed gravity of him, and then he said something he had not planned to say, something that arrived without warning from a place that had apparently been making decisions independently of his conscious mind for the past 18 hours. I want to be considered, Stone said, for placement. Whatever the process is, I want to start it. Margaret Thornton looked at him. The pause was long enough to contain several different thoughts. Mr. Mercer, she said, you are a single man with a significant criminal history and no established address. I have an address in Flagstaff, Stone said. I own the property, outright. He paused. And I'm aware of my history. You're going to be aware of it too. That's fine. All I'm asking is that you start the process instead of ending it before it begins. Caleb was watching him. Stone did not look at Caleb. He kept his eyes on Margaret Thornton. because this was the kind of conversation that required holding the ground squarely, and looking at the boy right now would undo the steadiness he needed. Thornton wrote something on her clipboard. Then she looked up. The process involves a background investigation, a home study psychological evaluation, and a court assessment. It is long and it is thorough, and the outcome is not guaranteed. I understand, Stone said, and it does not guarantee placement. I understand that too. She looked at him for another moment. Then she said with the first note of something genuinely human he'd heard from her, Why, Mr. Mercer, you don't know these children. Stone finally looked at Caleb. The boy was watching him with those border-colored eyes, completely still, waiting for the answer, with the focused attention of someone who knows that the next few words are going to matter more than most. Stone thought about a highway in the desert, about a boy with no shoes and a baby in his arms, and a voice that cracked open the empty air and hit something in Stone's chest that 12 years of careful isolation had apparently not fully insulated. Because he asked me not to leave, Stone said. And I don't break that kind of promise. Caleb looked at him, and for the first time since Stone had found him on the highway, through all the fear and the exhaustion and the grief and the controlled, relentless competence, Caleb Walker, 6 years old, let his face do the thing it had been working so hard not to do. He cried. Not the crying of despair, not the crying of someone who has given up. The crying of someone who has been carrying everything alone for so long that the first real evidence of someone else's shoulder is enough to finally break the surface open. Stone crossed the room and sat beside him on the bed, and said nothing because there was nothing to say. He just stayed there, present, solid, exactly where he said he would be. Behind them the monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Lily breathed, and Margaret Thornton stood in the doorway with her clipboard, and for 21 years of professional distance, her hand did not write anything for a very long time. Margaret Thornton left the room at 11:47 and came back at 2:15. Stone knew something had changed before she opened her mouth. It was in the way she carried the clipboard lower, not in front of her chest, the way she'd held it all morning, like a small shield. It was in the set of her jaw, which had lost the procedural tightness and acquired something more complicated. 21 years of institutional certainty did not evaporate in an afternoon, but it could crack. He had seen it cracking since Caleb's speech about familiar, about Lily not having language about the difference between protection and harm. She had gone somewhere, made calls, and whatever those calls produced had brought her back to this room with a different posture. There's a couple, she said. Tom and Sarah Mitchell. They're licensed foster parents in Copper Ridge. Experienced. Good record. They've taken sibling groups before. She looked at Caleb when she said this, not Stone. They have space for both of you. Together. Caleb looked at Stone. Stone looked at Thornton. And my request, the evaluation process. That takes time, she said carefully. Months minimum. The children need stable placement beginning now. The Mitchells are the bridge, not the destination. She paused. Nothing about the Mitchells prevents a parallel evaluation of another candidate. Candidate, Stone repeated. I'm using the official language, she said. I think you understand what I mean. He did. She was threading a needle, giving Caleb and Lily a safe immediate landing while leaving a door open that she was not required to leave open and had chosen to anyway. He looked at her and thought again that she was not a villain. She was a bureaucrat who had just bent her own procedure for a 6-year-old's argument about language acquisition, and that was worth something. Can I meet them? Caleb said. Both adults looked at him. The Mitchells, he said. Before I decide anything. Thornton blinked. You're 6. I walked 2 days across the desert, Caleb said. I think I get to meet the people first. Stone covered his mouth with his hand. Not quickly enough. Thornton wrote something on her clipboard, but the corner of her mouth had done something small and involuntary, and she turned slightly so it wasn't visible. I'll arrange it, she said. Tom and Sarah Mitchell arrived at 4 o'clock. Tom was a large, quiet man in his early 60s with calloused hands and a plaid shirt, and the manner of someone who spent most of his time outdoors and was entirely comfortable with silence. Sarah was smaller, faster-moving brown eyes that went immediately to Lily's monitors, and then to Caleb's feet, and then to Stone in the doorway, taking an inventory in about 4 seconds that Stone recognized as the assessment of a person who has cared for many children in crisis and knows exactly what she's looking at. Caleb sat on the bed with Lily in his lap. The nurses had allowed this. Lily's IV line was long enough, and he watched Tom and Sarah Mitchell come into the room with the focused attention he brought to everything. Tom sat in the chair by the door, giving space. Sarah moved closer, but not too close, with the instinctive calibration of someone who understands that frightened children have a radius. "Hi, Caleb," she said. "I'm Sarah. I heard you've had a pretty hard few days." "3 days," Caleb said. "Or 4. I lost count somewhere." "That happens," Sarah said. "When everything is hard, time gets blurry." Caleb absorbed this. "You've had hard times." "I have," she said simply. No performance, no explanation volunteered, just the straightforward confirmation. Caleb looked at Tom. "You don't say much." Tom looked up from the floor. "I say things when I have something worth saying." Caleb considered this. "My mom was like that." A pause that carried weight. "She said people who talk too much are usually trying to convince themselves." Tom looked at his wife. Something passed between them, not a look of surprise, but of recognition. Sarah turned back to Caleb with an expression that had quietly changed. "She sounds like she was a wise person," Sarah said. "She was," Caleb said. He looked down at Lily. "She got sick. She kept going anyway because of us, but she ran out of road." He said it plainly, the way you say a hard thing when you've had 3 days alone to find the words for it. "I don't blame her. She went as far as she could." The room held that sentence for a moment. Then Caleb looked up at Stone, who was still in the doorway, and said, "Can they be trusted?" Stone had spent 2 days observing Tom and Sarah Mitchell for approximately 6 minutes. But he had also spent decades reading people in situations where the read meant something, where you needed to know in 30 seconds whether the person across from you was going to be a problem. And what he saw in Tom Mitchell's hands and Sarah Mitchell's eyes, and the particular way they sat in this room, taking up only the space they needed, not performing, not selling anything, was the real thing. "Yeah," Stone said. "I think they can." Caleb looked at the Mitchells. He looked at Lily. He said, "If I go with you, Stone still comes to visit. That's not a request. That's a condition." Sarah Mitchell looked at Stone. He gave her no signal. This was Caleb's negotiation. "If Mr. Mercer is willing," she said, "then yes." "He's willing," Caleb said with complete certainty, without looking at Stone. Stone found he could not argue with that. Jade. Lily was discharged the following morning. The nurses had developed collective opinions about all of them over 48 hours that they expressed mostly through small gifts: a stuffed rabbit for Lily that appeared on the bed without explanation, an extra pudding cup that materialized beside Caleb's lunch tray, a thermos of coffee that Priya left on the chair outside the room each morning without ceremony. These were not large gestures. They were the gestures of people who operate in institutions and have found the small gaps where human warmth still fits. Stone helped carry Lily out to Sarah Mitchell's car. He was aware doing this that it was the first time since the highway that he had been outside with both children, and was about to not take them with him. He stood by the car while Sarah buckled Lily's car seat, and Tom held the door. Caleb was beside him. The boy was not crying. He had made his calculations, reached his conclusions, agreed to his terms. He was executing the plan. That was who he was. "You have my number," Stone said. "I have it memorized," Caleb said. He looked up. "You need to start the process, the evaluation thing. Don't wait." "I wasn't planning to wait. People say they're not going to wait, and then they wait." "I'll start it today," Stone said. Caleb looked at him steadily. "Promise me the way you promised in the hospital." Stone understood the distinction. Not a casual reassurance. The real kind. The kind you pay for if you break it. "I promise," he said. Caleb nodded. Then he did something that Stone was unprepared for. He turned and put both arms around Stone's waist and pressed his face against Stone's ribs and held on for exactly 4 seconds tight, certain and completely deliberate. Then he let go, walked to the car, and got in. Stone stood by the curb and watched the car pull away. He stood there for a while after it had gone. Then he took out his phone and called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Voss, and she had been practicing family law in Arizona for 19 years and had heard most things. She had not apparently heard Stone Mercer's particular combination of factors before, because when he finished laying out the situation over the phone, she was quiet for longer than lawyers usually allowed themselves to be quiet when the meter was running. "Let me understand what you're telling me," she said. "You have no prior relationship with these children. You found them on a highway. You have a significant criminal history, including Hell's Angels affiliation. You have no history of child care or family management, and you want to pursue adoptive placement." "That's correct." "Mr. Mercer, I know what it looks like," Stone said. "I need to know if it's possible." Another pause. Possible and probable are different things. "I'm not asking about probable. I'm asking if there's a path." "There is always a path," she said carefully. "The question is whether the path leads where you want to go." A pause. "The criminal history is the primary obstacle. The nature of the offenses, the time elapsed, the demonstrated behavior in the intervening period, all of that goes into the assessment. 16 years clean with no incidents is meaningful. It's not disqualifying on its face. What else? Stable housing. Stable income. Character references ideally from community figures, clergy employers, established members of the community who can speak to who you are now versus who the record describes." She paused. "And the children's own testimony matters. A child of 6 is old enough to express preference. Courts listen to that." "He already said what he wants." "Then write it down," she said. "Date it. Get a nurse or a social worker to witness it. Start building the record today, Mr. Mercer, because you are going to need every piece of it." Stone drove back to Flagstaff that afternoon and spent the evening in his house, actually in it, not just sleeping in it between trips, looking at it the way you look at something you've been ignoring for too long. It was a real house. 3 bedrooms, though. He used one, a yard. A kitchen he'd learned to cook in over the past decade because eating at diners every night gets expensive, and he'd had a lot of time to fill. It was clean because he was by nature a clean person. It was bare because he had not accumulated the objects of a life that included other people. He sat at the kitchen table and looked at the spare room and thought about what a child's room looked like. He thought, "I don't know how to do any of this." He also thought, he walked 2 days across the desert. The least you can do is learn. 3 weeks passed. In those 3 weeks, Stone drove from Flagstaff to Copper Ridge 4 times, which was 160 miles each way, which he did not think about as a sacrifice because it did not feel like one. He sat with Caleb at the Mitchell's kitchen table and helped with the reading practice that the school district had assigned. He watched Lily learn to pull herself up on the coffee table and fall and pull herself up again with the cheerful violence of a baby who has decided walking is going to happen regardless. He ate Sarah Mitchell's cooking, which was extraordinary, and listened to Tom Mitchell talk about the 200 acres of land he managed and the particular technical problems of large-scale water conservation in the Arizona desert, and found that he had genuinely interesting things to say about them. He also spent those 3 weeks being investigated. The background check was thorough. He had expected thorough. He had known since the hospital that thorough was coming and had decided sitting in that plastic chair at 3 in the morning that thorough was not something he was afraid of anymore. He answered every question Patricia Voss prepared him to answer. He provided documentation. He submitted to the psychological evaluation with a psychologist named Dr. Renata Chavez, who asked him questions for 3 hours about his childhood, his years in the club, his reasons for leaving his current life, his capacity for attachment, and his understanding of what raising children would require of him. At the end of the 3 hours, Dr. Chavez looked at her notes and then at Stone and said, "You know, most people who pursue this kind of application try to minimize their past." "I know," Stone said. "You haven't minimized anything." "It happened," Stone said. "Minimizing it doesn't make it not have happened." She wrote something. Then, "Tell me about the moment you decided." On the highway. Stone thought about it. He thought about the shape the boy had made against the heat shimmer. The crossed arms. The way the bundle had fingers. "I didn't decide," he said. "My hand came off the throttle before I'd made any decision. The decision came after, when I was already stopping." He paused. "I think maybe I'd been making that decision for a long time without knowing it. And the highway was just the place it arrived." She looked at him for a long moment. "That's a very honest answer. You asked an honest question." She closed her folder. "I'll have my report to the court within 10 days. Sheriff Briggs called on a Thursday. Stone was at the Mitchell's house in the backyard, watching Caleb teach Lily how to pat the ground, a purely one-directional lesson, since Lily's contributions to the curriculum were random, but Caleb was committed when his phone rang. He stepped to the edge of the yard and answered. "We found Dale Pruitt," Briggs said. Stone went very still. Tucson PD picked him up 2 days ago on an unrelated warrant, outstanding charges from 2019. When they ran him, our BOLO came up the gas station incident, the description from the attendant. A pause. "He's been arrested, pending investigation into his connection to the Walker children and to their mother." Stone breathed out slowly. What was he to her? "That's what's being investigated," Briggs said. "What I can tell you is that we found her phone records. He'd been calling her for 8 months, dozens of calls, and there are records suggesting she'd obtained a protective order against him in New Mexico 2 years ago that was later dropped." Another pause. "She was running from something real, Mr. Mercer." "I know she was," Stone said. "I thought you'd want to know." Briggs paused. "For what it's worth, the evaluation report came across my desk this morning. The psychologist's. I'm not supposed to tell you that." "Then don't tell me," Stone said. "It was favorable," Briggs said. "Significantly." He hung up. Stone put his phone in his pocket and turned back to the yard. Caleb had apparently abandoned the ground-patting curriculum in favor of attempting to demonstrate rolling over, which Lily found delightful, and was not remotely interested in replicating. She kept reaching for his face instead. "Stone?" Caleb called. "Come show her how to roll." "She doesn't believe me." Stone walked back across the yard and sat down on the grass. Actual grass, actual ground. Arizona afternoon, pressing down on all three of them, with its dry, indifferent heat, and demonstrated with the dignity of a 52-year-old man with a biker's back and 2 rebuilt knees, the concept of rolling over. Lily grabbed his ear. He let her. Caleb watched this with the satisfaction of a project manager whose team has finally come together. "She likes you," he said. "I know," Stone said. "She doesn't like most people," Caleb said. "She cried at the pediatrician for 20 minutes. "I'm honored." Caleb was quiet for a moment, pulling a piece of dry grass apart with his fingers. Then, "The process. How's it going?" Stone looked at him. He thought about what Briggs had said, about what he was and was not supposed to know, about the careful, thorough, slow machinery of a system that was processing him, his past, his present, his capacity, his character, and had not yet rendered its verdict. "It's going," he said. "It's moving forward. But it's not done." "No, not done." Caleb pulled another piece of grass. "Are you scared?" Stone considered this. He was not a man who had been asked that question often. He was not a man who had answered it honestly when he was asked. But he was sitting in a yard in Copper Ridge on a Thursday afternoon with a baby pulling on his ear and a 6-year-old forensically dismantling the lawn, and the old answers didn't fit the situation. "Yeah," he said. "A little." Caleb looked at him with some surprise that was immediately replaced by something like respect. "Of what?" "Of not being enough," Stone said. Of the process saying no. Of having told you I'd stay, and then finding out that staying isn't mine to decide. Caleb was quiet. He looked at Lily, who had abandoned Stone's ear and was now attempting to eat a blade of grass with the focus of a connoisseur. "You know what I think," he said. "Tell me. I think the process can say whatever it wants." He looked up at Stone with those clear, border-colored eyes. "But you stopped. Every other car kept going. You stopped." He paused. "That's not something a process decided. That was you. And whatever the process says, that part already happened." Stone looked at the boy. He thought about all the things a person could say to that. All the ways you could qualify it, contextualize it. Remind a 6-year-old that the world did not operate on the logic of clean moral gestures. He thought about all the things that could still go wrong. The court date that hadn't been set, the home study that hadn't been completed, the hearing where Margaret Thornton would present her recommendation, and a judge would look at Stone Mercer's record and make a decision about whether a man like him could be a father. He thought about all of that. Then he looked at Caleb and said, "You're a smart kid, you know that. My mom said the same thing," Caleb said. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. Lily finally succeeded in eating the grass, made an expression of profound betrayal, and spat it out. Both of them watched. The moment broke the way good moments break, not with drama, but with something ordinary and clean. The way a door opens to let light through rather than to announce its opening. Stone sat in the yard with 2 children and felt the future assembling itself around him piece by piece, uncertain and possible and terrifying, and exactly like something worth fighting for. He didn't know yet what was coming. He didn't know that in 6 days, a man from his past would call his phone. That the voice on the other end would be one he hadn't heard in a decade, and that what it said would put everything, the process, the placement, Caleb, Lily, all of it on the edge of something he would have to choose between. He sat in the yard. He stayed. The call came on a Tuesday. Stone was in Flagstaff in the 3rd bedroom, which he had driven to a second-hand furniture store the previous Saturday, and filled with a mattress, a low dresser, and a bookshelf. Because Patricia Voss had told him the home study assessor would look at the physical space, and he wanted the space to say something real rather than something desperate. He was assembling the bookshelf with the instructions spread on the floor when the phone rang. He looked at the number. Arizona area code, but not one he recognized. He almost let it go to voicemail. Something made him answer. Stone. The voice was immediately familiar in the way that certain voices bypass the years and land directly in the body, a physical recognition, a tightening across the shoulders before the brain has finished processing. Low, unhurried, carrying the specific weight of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Reagan, Stone said. Victor Reagan. Former Arizona chapter president of the Hells Angels. A man Stone had ridden with for 11 years, answered to for 8 of those, and had not spoken to since the morning he'd turned in his cut and walked away from the chapter house without looking back. He had known on that morning that walking away was not something Victor Reagan considered a legitimate option. He had known that the account was not closed. He had simply decided that the open account was a problem for a future version of himself and ridden toward Flagstaff and a different life. The future version of himself was now on the phone. "Heard you picked up some cargo," Reagan said. His voice carried nothing identifiable, not threat, not warmth, not accusation, just the particular flatness of a man who has spent decades not telegraphing his intentions. 2 kids, hospital in Copper Ridge, lawyer, court filings. Stone set down the bookshelf instruction sheet. "Where did you hear that?" "We hear things," Reagan said. "You know how it works. I left how it works behind a long time ago." "You left a patch," Reagan said. "You didn't leave a history." A pause that was not empty. It was filled with everything the words were not saying. "I'm not calling to threaten you, Stone. I want you to understand that up front." "Then why are you calling?" "Because some of the younger guys have opinions about a former brother getting his name in the system. Court filings, background checks, lawyers poking around in chapter history." Reagan's voice remained level. "They think it's a problem." Stone's jaw tightened. And what do you think? Reagan was quiet for a moment. I think you've been gone a long time. I think whatever you're doing with those kids is your business. And I think the younger guys need to understand the difference between a threat and a man who simply left. Another pause. But I need you to hear me, Stone. I can hold them for now. I can't hold them forever. The noise around your name is getting louder. Stone stood up. He walked to the window that looked out on the front yard. The unremarkable, quiet residential yard of a man who had spent a decade building a life small enough not to attract notice. What are you telling me to do, Victor? I'm not telling you anything, Reagan said. I'm informing you of a situation. What you do with the information is your decision. That sounds a lot like a threat with better manners. Something shifted in Reagan's voice. Not anger, something older than anger. You were a good writer, he said. You were a better man before you came to us than after. I knew that then, and I know it now. A pause. Take care of your kids, Stone, but understand that the world doesn't reorganize itself around a man's good intentions. The call ended. Stone stood at the window and held the phone at his side and breathed through the thing that was moving through his chest. Not fear exactly, but the particular compound of fear and recognition that comes when a part of your past you thought was behind you proves it was only resting. He called Patricia Voss. She answered on the second ring, which meant she had been expecting something like this, which meant she was a better lawyer than he had even understood. He told her about the call, word for word, as accurately as he could reconstruct it. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "How serious is the threat?" Regan said the younger members have opinions. That's the club's way of saying a conversation has already happened that I wasn't in. Could they interfere with the court process? With your application? Not directly, Stone said. They operate outside the system, not inside it. What they could do is make my life difficult enough that the process becomes moot, or make the children a target to leverage me. The words came out of his mouth and hit him differently than he expected. Make the children a target. He stood very still after he said it and felt something that was not fear at all. It was something harder and simpler and much more certain. I need you to file whatever we file, he said. Keep the process moving. Don't slow down because of this. Stone, don't slow down, he said again. Whatever they do, stopping is not the answer. Patricia Voss was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm going to reach out to Sheriff Briggs, inform him of the call, create a record. Do it. And I'd recommend you tell the Mitchells. Stone had already thought about this. I'll tell them today. He drove to Copper Ridge. Tom Mitchell opened the door and read Stone's face in about 3 seconds. He didn't say anything. He just stepped back and let Stone in and called into the kitchen. Sarah, Stone's here. Might want to sit down. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Stone had helped Caleb with reading practice, where Sarah had put plates in front of everyone with the undemonstrative generosity that was apparently just her natural operating mode. Caleb was at school. Lily was asleep in the back bedroom. The house was quiet, in the way of a house that had absorbed many difficult conversations and was prepared to absorb another. Stone told them everything. The call, Reagan, the younger members, what it meant and what it might mean. He did not minimize it because Tom and Sarah Mitchell had agreed to take in 2 children who came with complications, and they deserved to know that one of those complications had just revealed a new dimension. When he finished, Tom Mitchell looked at his hands for a moment. Then he looked at Stone. You think they'd come here to this house? I think it's possible, Stone said. I think it's more likely they try to pressure me directly, but I wanted you to know. Tom nodded slowly. What do you need from us? Stone had not expected that question. He had expected concern reasonably. He had expected the Mitchells to weigh their own safety, their own household, the risk calculation of a couple in their 60s with a biker's unresolved politics parking itself on their doorstep. What he had not expected was, what do you need from us? Asked with the plain solidity of a man offering a tool from a rack. "Nothing yet," Stone said. "Awareness. A number to call if anything unusual." "You don't have to explain what unusual looks like," Tom said. "I grew up on the border. I've known dangerous men." He looked at Stone evenly. "I've also known men who used to be dangerous and aren't anymore. Different animal. I can tell the difference." Stone looked at him. "Most people can't." "Most people don't pay attention," Tom said simply. Sarah had been quiet through all of this, her hands around her coffee cup. Now she said, "Does Caleb know about any of this?" "No," Stone said. "Good," she said. "He carries enough." She looked up. "Whatever happens, Stone, this doesn't change anything for us. The children stay here. You keep visiting. We keep building toward what the court decides. You understand me?" Stone understood her. He felt the understanding go through him like something solid sliding into place. He had walked into this house expecting to deliver news that might unravel things, and instead found that the things here were built differently than he'd realized, built to hold under pressure rather than simply to look stable in fair weather. "Thank you," he said. It came out rough. He didn't apologize for that. Caleb came home from school at 3:15. He walked in, dropped his backpack with the precision of a child who has identified his spot in a house and claimed it, and stopped when he saw Stone at the table. His expression did a quick calculation. "You're here on a Tuesday," he said. "You only come on weekends." "Wanted to see you," Stone said. "Something happened," Caleb said, not a question. He sat down across the table. "Tell me." "You're 6, Stone said. "You keep saying that like it means something," Caleb said. Tom Mitchell made a sound in the next room that could have been a cough. Stone looked at Caleb and made a decision. Not to tell him everything, some things were still not available in the version for a 6-year-old, but to tell him the shape of it, because Caleb Walker had an instinct for when he was being protected through omission. And being protected through omission, Stone had come to understand, was something this particular child experienced as disrespect. "Some people from my past are unhappy about what I'm doing," Stone said. "Trying to adopt you and Lily. They've made some noise." Caleb was very still. "Dangerous people." "They used to be," Stone said. "I'm handling it." "How?" "Lawyer, sheriff. The right people know." Caleb thought about this with the visible, methodical quality he brought to problems. "Are we in danger? I don't think so. I wanted Tom and Sarah to be aware, and I wanted to tell you myself, rather than have you find out another way." Caleb looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "My mom used to do that. Tell me things herself, instead of letting me hear them wrong." He looked down at the table. "She said people who love you tell you the hard things straight." Stone said nothing. "Is that why you came today?" Caleb said. "On a Tuesday." "Yeah," Stone said. Caleb nodded once. "Okay." He pulled his backpack toward him and took out a worksheet. "Will you help me with this?" "It's fractions. I don't understand fractions." Stone looked at the worksheet. He looked at this boy who had just been told that dangerous men from Stone's past were making noise and had processed it, filed it, and moved on to fractions. Not because he wasn't frightened. Stone could see the slightly elevated tension in his shoulders, the way he held the pencil a little tighter than necessary, but because he had decided that the best response to a managed threat was to keep doing the ordinary things that a life was made of. Stone pulled the worksheet toward him. "Fractions aren't hard once you see the logic," he said. "A fraction is just a question. What part of the whole are we talking about?" Caleb looked at him. "That's actually helpful." "Don't sound surprised." "I'm not surprised," Caleb said. He almost smiled again. He was getting closer to a full one. Stone was keeping an informal record. The call Stone had not been expecting came 10 days later, and it came from a number he knew. Marcus Wade. Stone had met Wade twice, once at a community meeting in Copper Ridge that Patricia Voss had encouraged him to attend to demonstrate civic engagement, and once by coincidence at the county courthouse, when Stone was there for a filing and Wade was there for what turned out to be completely unrelated testimony in a property dispute. He was a pastor at a small church in Copper Ridge, 40-something, with the recovered quality of a man who had been through something specific and had decided to do something specific with having come out the other side. He had been addicted to methamphetamine for 6 years. In his 30s, he had told Stone with the directness of someone for whom the story was a tool, not a wound. He ran a recovery program out of the church and had testified in family court cases before on behalf of parents working toward reunification. He had taken an interest in Stone's case in a way Stone had found slightly suspicious at first, and then simply present. Wade was a man who attached himself to things that needed working on, and Stone Mercer's situation had apparently qualified. "I need to talk to you about something," Wade said. "Can we meet?" "Tell me now," Stone said. "I'd rather in person." Stone drove to Copper Ridge again. His odometer was developing opinions about this. They met at a diner. Not Ruth's, a different one on the east side of town, and Wade was already in a booth when Stone arrived, coffee in front of him, hands around the cup, with the composure of a man who had learned that stillness was something you built, not something you were born with. "There's been a meeting," Wade said when Stone sat down. "What kind of meeting?" "Margaret Thornton, the home study assessor, a judge named Paulson who's been assigned to the case." Wade looked at him. "Not a formal hearing. A preliminary conversation about your application." "Patricia should have been notified. It wasn't about you specifically," Wade said. "It was about the case overall, the children's placement, the timeline options going forward." He wrapped both hands around his cup. "There is a family in Phoenix, cousins of the children's father, whom the department located through public records. The mother had cut off contact with them years ago, but they exist, and they've been contacted, and they've indicated interest." Stone went very still. "Blood relatives," he said. "Distant ones. People Anna Walker apparently left behind deliberately." Wade looked at him directly. "I'm not telling you this to alarm you. I'm telling you because you need to know that the path you're on is about to get harder, and you need to decide right now how hard you're willing to fight." "I've been fighting," Stone said. "I know. Patricia's filings are good. Dr. Chavez's report is good. Briggs's statement of current conduct is good." Wade paused. "What you don't have is a community voice. Someone to stand in that courtroom and say not just that you're adequate on paper, but that they've seen you with those children and they know what they saw." Stone looked at him. "Are you offering to be that voice?" "I'm offering to organize it," Wade said. "Ruth from the diner, the nurses at Mercy General. Donna, the pediatric nurse who watched you with the baby. Priya, who left you coffee every morning without being asked." He leaned forward slightly. "These are people who saw you. Real observation, not evaluation. That's worth something different in a courtroom." Stone sat with this for a moment. The particular difficulty of being helped, of accepting that your case was being built by other people's willingness to speak for you, was not something he had a long history with. He had spent most of his life on the other side of that equation, or outside it entirely. "Why are you doing this?" Stone said. Wade looked at him with the particular steadiness of a man who has answered the version of this question that was aimed at himself, and is therefore not confused by it when it's aimed outward. "Because I know what it looks like when a man is becoming something different than what he was," he said. "I've spent 10 years watching people do it in my recovery program. I've also watched the system refuse to believe it's happened because the paperwork from the old life is more concrete than the evidence of the new one." He paused. "You're the real thing, Stone. I'd be doing something wrong if I watched you lose because nobody showed up to say so." Stone looked at the table. He thought about the third bedroom in Flagstaff with the second-hand bookshelf. He thought about Patricia Voss and her 19 years of family law and the files she was building. He thought about Caleb doing fractions at the kitchen table with the slightly too tight grip on his pencil. He thought about Lily pulling on his ear in the backyard and the look on her face when she saw him come through the door, which was not the look of a child who saw a stranger. "What do you need from me?" he said. Show up to everything, Wade said. Every visit, every filing, every meeting. Show up and be exactly what you've been, because what you've been is what's going to win this. Stone nodded. And the Phoenix relatives? Wade's expression shifted, not to worry, but to honesty. That's the harder piece. Blood has weight in family court, even thin blood. He paused. But Caleb has weight too. And Caleb's going to want to speak. Are you going to let him? Stone thought about a boy who had argued at 6 years old that he should get to meet the people before agreeing to anything. Who had told a social worker with 21 years of experience that she needed to do more than hear him? Who had said with complete clarity that Anna Walker had raised someone who understood that people who love you tell the hard things straight? Try to stop him, Stone said. Wade looked at him for a moment. Then he reached across the table and shook Stone's hand, not with the excessive warmth of a man selling something, but with the simple solidity of one person telling another, I've got you covered on this side. The home study was completed on a Wednesday in October. The assessor's name was Linda Cho, and she spent 4 hours in Stone's house, looking at everything and asking about most of it. She looked at the third bedroom and wrote things down. She looked at the kitchen and wrote things down. She looked at the yard and asked about the gate latch, which Stone had reinforced the previous weekend specifically because a 15-month-old was going to be walking confidently very soon, and he had no intention of finding out the hard way that the latch was insufficient. She asked him what he would do if Caleb had a nightmare. He told her what he had already been doing, that twice on his visits the boy had woken up calling out, and that Stone had sat on the edge of the bed and talked to him about ordinary things until the specific quality of his breathing changed, and he went back to sleep. You've done that, she said, already. He has bad nights sometimes, Stone said. His mother died 3 weeks before I found him. He'd been carrying everything alone. That doesn't go away because he's somewhere safe. She wrote something. Then, what do you do for yourself when the situation is emotionally difficult? Stone thought about this honestly. I drive, he said. I ride the bike on roads where there's not much traffic. I think out loud to myself, which I know sounds strange. It doesn't, she said. And I call Patricia Voss, he said, or Marcus Wade. I've started to understand that having people to call is not the same thing as being weak. That took a while. Cho looked up from her notes. She had done this for many years, and Stone could see that she was accustomed to scripted answers, prepared performances, the particular polish of people who had rehearsed for her visit. He had not rehearsed. He had decided that the same principle that applied to Dr. Chavez's evaluation applied here. The record should reflect the truth, not a curated version of the truth. Why do you want this? She asked. The simplest version. No legal context around it. Stone looked at the window of the third bedroom, at the bookshelf with nothing on it yet waiting. Because when I stopped on that highway, he said slowly, something in me recognized something in him. I know what it is to be very young and forced into being the person who holds everything together. I know what it costs. And I know that nobody came for me when I was that age, and that the absence of someone coming is not neutral, it shapes everything. He paused. I can't go back and fix what happened to me. But I stopped on that highway, and he looked at me and... He stopped, started again. I think some people are given a moment where they can do the thing they needed someone to do for them. And I think not taking that moment is the kind of thing you don't recover from. Cho wrote for a long time. When she left, she shook his hand at the door and said professionally that she would have her report to the court within 2 weeks. He closed the door. He stood in the hallway of his house. His actual house, the one he'd owned for 11 years and lived in like a waiting room, and felt it differently than he ever had, like it was becoming something, like the walls had been waiting for a reason and had just been given one. He called Caleb. How'd it go? Caleb said. No preamble. He had been waiting. Good, I think, Stone said. Honest. Honest is good, Caleb said immediately, with the confidence of his mother's son. There's something I need to tell you, Stone said. About some relatives, distant ones. We need to talk about it. Caleb was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then, are they going to try to take us? They may try, Stone said. I wanted you to know straight. Another 3 seconds. Okay. A pause. Stone. Yeah. I've thought about what I'm going to say to the judge, Caleb said. I've been practicing. Stone closed his eyes for a moment. Yeah. Yeah. A pause. It's good. I think it's really good. Stone leaned against the wall of the hallway with the empty bookshelf visible through the open door. He thought about a boy in a paper gown at 3 in the morning who had said, I know what it's like. Who had eaten crackers at a diner counter with the controlled urgency of someone who had decided that visible desperation was no longer appropriate. Who carried his dying sister across 2 days of desert and paid for the supplies he stole, and bit the man who tried to take him and kept going. I know it is, Stone said. He heard Lily's voice in the background, a bright declarative sound, the sound of a baby who has discovered that she has opinions and intends to share them, and then Caleb's voice away from the phone saying, Okay, I'm coming. Go, Stone said. I'll be there Saturday. Saturday, Caleb confirmed. Then before he hung up, Stone. Yeah. We're going to win. Not a question. Not a wish. A statement of fact from a 6-year-old who had already won fights that grown men would not have survived and who had decided that this was simply another one. Stone held the phone after the call ended. Outside, the Arizona afternoon was doing what Arizona afternoons did, pressing down with its full dry weight, indifferent and absolute. The same sun that had beaten down on a highway 3 months ago, when a boy with no shoes and a baby in his arms had walked into Stone Mercer's line of sight and changed the direction of everything. The bookshelf waited in the 3rd bedroom. Stone went to the garage where he had 3 boxes of things he'd been meaning to sort for years and started going through them. Children's books. He had 3 acquired. He could not fully explain how at various points over the years, the way objects sometimes enter a life before their purpose is clear. He carried them to the 3rd bedroom and put them on the shelf. It was a start. The court date was set for the 2nd Thursday of November. Patricia Voss called Stone on a Monday morning to confirm it, and the way she said it with a particular steadiness that he had learned to read as her version of cautious optimism told him that she believed the filings were solid. Dr. Chavez's report had gone in. Linda Cho's home study had gone in. Briggs had submitted a character statement. Marcus Wade had submitted letters from Ruth from Donna, the pediatric nurse from Priya, from 2 members of his congregation who had witnessed Stone's visits with the children over the preceding months. The Phoenix relatives had also filed. Their names were Gerald and Connie Farrow. Second cousins of the children's father, a man who had apparently exited Anna Walker's life before Caleb was born and whose family had made no contact in 6 years. Patricia had done the research. Gerald Farrow was 58, retired, no criminal history. Connie Farrow was 55, former teacher. They lived in a 3-bedroom house in a suburb of Phoenix. They had no children of their own. On paper, they were exactly what a court was designed to favor: blood stability, no complications. How bad is it? Stone asked. It's not bad, Patricia said carefully. It's real. The judge will weigh blood connection against demonstrated relationship and the children's expressed preference. All 3 of those things matter. A pause. What matters most in my experience is what happens in that room. When does Caleb speak? After the adult testimony. Judge Paulson has indicated he will hear from the child directly. She paused again. Stone, he's been preparing something. I know, Stone said. Have you heard it? No, Stone said. He wouldn't tell me what it was. He said I had to wait. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That child is going to be something extraordinary, she said. Not professionally, just as a person who had seen many things and knew what she was looking at. He already is, Stone said. Said. Victor Regan called again on the Wednesday before the hearing. Stone was in the kitchen of his Flagstaff house at 7 in the morning, and he almost didn't answer. But the same instinct that had made him answer the first time made him answer again. The understanding that an unacknowledged thing does not go away. It simply becomes an unacknowledged thing with more time to grow. I handled it, Reagan said without preamble. Stone set down his coffee cup. What does that mean? The younger members. The noise around your name. Reagan's voice was the same as it always was, flat, unhurried, carrying its own gravity. I handled it. They won't be a problem. Stone stood very still. Why? A pause. Not the pause of a man choosing a manipulation. Stone had learned to tell the difference long ago. The pause of a man choosing an honest thing he had not planned to say. I have a granddaughter, Reagan said. 8 months old. My daughter's. Another pause. I've been thinking about that boy of yours. What you told me he did. Walking 2 days in the desert. A long silence. I've been in that club for 30 years, and I've seen men do things that would make most people not sleep for a week. And none of them, not one, had the guts that 6-year-old has. Stone said nothing. You did a thing on that highway, Reagan said. I'm not a man who says things like this. But you did the right thing. And whatever the rest of it was, the years in the chapter, what we did, who we were, that's still true. He paused. The boys won't touch you. You have my word. Stone understood what Victor Regan's word cost him in the economy of the world he still operated in. It was not a small thing. It was possibly the largest thing Regan had to give. Thank you, Stone said. 2 words, but real ones. Win your case, Regan said, and hung up. Stone put the phone down on the counter. He stood in his kitchen in the early morning and felt something he could not immediately name a loosening across his shoulders, an unclenching of something he had been holding tightly for weeks without fully acknowledging that he was holding it. The past had reached forward and touched the present, and for once, the touch had not been a blow. He picked up the coffee cup and finished it and got ready to drive to Copper Ridge. Dud. He took Caleb and Lily to the park that afternoon. Not a significant park, a small one 2 blocks from the Mitchell's house with a swing set and a climbing structure and a bench where Tom Mitchell sometimes sat on mornings when he needed to think without the background of the house around him. Stone pushed Lily in the baby swing and watched her face do the thing it did every time, that sequence of uncertainty, then adjustment, then the absolute full-body delight of a baby who has decided that this is the best thing that has ever happened. Caleb sat on the regular swing beside her, not swinging, feet dragging. He had been quiet since Stone arrived, not the closed quiet of a child processing fear. Stone knew that quiet, it had a different texture, but the quiet of a child who has something large inside him and is deciding how to hold it. Tomorrow, Caleb said. Tomorrow, Stone confirmed. Caleb dragged his foot in a small arc in the dirt. I've been thinking about what I'm going to say. You've been practicing for a while, Stone said. I changed it, Caleb said. 3 times. He looked up. The first version was too angry. The second version was too... He searched for the word. Too much like I was trying to convince someone. Like I was arguing. He paused. My mom used to say that the most powerful thing you can say is the true thing, just clean, without trying to make it work. Stone looked at him. She was right. I know. He was quiet for a moment. I want to ask you something. Go ahead. If the judge says no. He said it without flinching, which cost him something that Stone could see at the edges of his eyes. If they give us to the pharaohs, what happens? Stone kept pushing Lily's swing with one hand, steady, rhythmic. He thought about the version of the answer that was reassuring and the version that was true, and he chose the true one because that was what Anna Walker's son deserved. We appeal, Stone said. Patricia files for appeal, and we keep going. How long can you keep going? As long as it takes. Caleb looked at him steadily. You're not just saying that. I'm not just saying that. The boy nodded. He put both feet on the ground and pushed himself into a small swing arc back and forth, thinking. Lily made a sound of protest at the slower pushing, and Stone corrected course immediately, which made her immediately satisfied, which made Caleb almost smile. I'm not scared, Caleb said. Not defiantly, just accurately. I know, Stone said. I was scared on the highway, Caleb said. I was scared in the hospital when they were going to separate us. I was scared when you told me about Reagan. He paused. But I'm not scared tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm just going to say the true thing clean. Stone looked at him, this boy who had been forged by loss and fear, and the particular kind of love that shows itself in action, rather than in words, and felt something that was not pride, exactly because pride implied a claim that wasn't yet official. It was something more fundamental than pride. It was recognition. The recognition of one person seeing another person clearly and knowing what they're looking at. Your mom would be proud of you, Stone said. Caleb's swing slowed. He looked at the ground. I know, he said softly. I can feel it sometimes, like she's still paying attention. Neither of them said anything for a while. Lily swung and made sounds of contentment. The afternoon moved around them in the easy, unhurried way of a day that does not know it is the day before something important. The courtroom was smaller than Stone had expected. County Family Court wood paneling, fluorescent lighting that flattened everything, a flag in the corner. Judge Paulson was in his early 60s, reading glasses on a chain around his neck, with the quality of a man who had presided over a great many things, and had long since stopped being impressed by performance and was interested only in substance. Gerald and Connie Farrow sat at the table to the left. Stone had not seen them before. Gerald was a large man carefully dressed with the expression of someone attempting to project warmth and finding it slightly effortful. Connie was smaller, more natural in her manner. Stone could see looking at her that whatever her husband's motivations were, hers were genuine. She had looked at Caleb and Lily when they entered the room, and her face had done something real. That mattered to him. Patricia Voss sat beside Stone. Across the aisle, the Farrows' attorney, a woman named Helen Marsh, arranged her files with practiced efficiency. Margaret Thornton sat in the gallery with her clipboard present as a court-appointed witness to the children's welfare rather than as an adversary, and she gave Stone a brief nod when he looked at her. He nodded back. Tom and Sarah Mitchell sat in the gallery with Marcus Wade between them. Ruth from the diner was there. Donna, the pediatric nurse. Priya. Stone had not asked any of them to come in person. Wade had organized it, and when Stone saw them as he took his seat, he had to look at the ceiling briefly, which was becoming a thing he did in moments he was not fully prepared for. Caleb sat beside Sarah Mitchell, holding Lily in his lap, wearing a blue button-down shirt that Sarah had apparently purchased for this occasion and that he was wearing with the dignified acceptance of a soldier in dress uniform. Judge Paulson reviewed the filings for the first 20 minutes without speaking. Then he looked up and began. The adult testimony took an hour and a half. Patricia laid out Stone's case with the precision of someone who had been building it for months and knew exactly which stones to place and in what order. Helen Marsh presented the Farrows' position with skill, the blood connection, the stable household, the proximity to what remained of the children's extended family. Gerald Farrow testified with prepared warmth. Connie Farrow testified quietly and honestly, and Stone respected her for it, even as he sat on the other side of the thing she was asking for. Margaret Thornton was called. She testified for 11 minutes. She described the events at Mercy General. She described Caleb's expressed preference, his articulation of Lily's need for familiar, the moment Stone had stated his intention to be considered for placement. And then she said something Stone had not expected. In 21 years of this work, she said, I have seen many people attempt to involve themselves with vulnerable children for many different reasons. Some of those reasons are good and some are not. What I witnessed in that hospital was something I have seen very rarely. She paused. A man who had no obligation, no legal standing, and no personal history with these children choosing repeatedly over many hours under significant institutional pressure not to leave. Not because the system required it, because a boy asked him not to. She looked at Judge Paulson directly. I have revised my initial recommendation. My current recommendation is that the court give serious and substantive weight to Mr. Mercer's application. The room was quiet. Helen Marsh made a note. Gerald Farrow's jaw shifted slightly. Patricia Voss's hand on her legal pad did not move, but Stone could feel her stillness beside him and knew that what had just happened was significant. Judge Paulson looked over his glasses at Thornton. "Your initial recommendation was different." "It was," she said. "I've changed my mind. That doesn't happen often. When it does, I think it's worth noting." Caleb was called at 11:40. He walked from the gallery to the chair beside the judge's bench. There was no witness box for a child. They had arranged a chair at the same level as the judge which Patricia had requested, and Paulson had granted with the same walk Stone had first seen in the hospital corridor. Head up, measured. The walk of someone who had decided before they started moving how they intended to arrive. He sat down. He looked at Judge Paulson. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Caleb, do you know why you're here today?" "Yes," Caleb said. "You're going to decide where Lily and I live." "That's right. And you know that whatever you tell me here is important, and that I'm going to listen carefully." "Yes." "Okay. Can you tell me in your own words what you'd like me to know?" Caleb folded his hands in his lap. He looked at the judge, and then for just a moment, he looked at Stone. One look, a breath, then back to the judge. "My mother died," he said. "I know you know that. I'm not telling you that for sympathy. I'm telling you because everything that happened after came from that, and you need to know what those days were like to understand what I'm going to say." He paused. "I carried my sister for 2 days across the desert because someone dangerous was looking for us, and I didn't know who to trust. I was scared the whole time. I'm not ashamed of that. Being scared and still going is the whole point." Paulson said nothing. His glasses were folded in his hands. He was listening with the quality of a man who has learned to hear what children say when they are not performing. "Every car passed me on that highway," Caleb said. "I counted. 43 cars. I counted because I needed something to do while I was waiting for someone to stop." He paused. Stone stopped. He didn't know us. He wasn't going to get anything from stopping. He just got off his bike and helped. He stopped for a moment, and Stone saw him doing the thing he'd described, saying the true thing, clean, without embellishment. "I have met the Pharaohs. They seem like good people. I'm not saying they're bad people. But they didn't know us 3 months ago either, and they also didn't stop. They had to be found and called and asked." A sound in the gallery, slight. Stone did not look back. "Stone didn't need to be called," Caleb said. "He just stopped." He looked at his folded hands and then back at the judge. "My mom said that the difference between love and obligation is that love doesn't need a reason. Stone didn't have a reason to stop that day. He stopped because that's who he is." A pause. "That's the kind of father I want. Not the kind that's there because someone arranged it. The kind that stopped because he couldn't do anything else." The room held what he had said. Judge Paulson was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Caleb, is there anything else?" Caleb thought about it. "Yeah," he said. "One more thing." He looked at Stone directly across the room, not at the judge, and his voice remained steady. "He's been scared this whole time. He told me so. He's not a man who usually admits things like that, but he told me because my mom raised me to know that people who love you tell the hard things straight." He paused. "He's been scared, and he kept coming anyway. Every Saturday. Every time. He kept coming." He turned back to the judge. "That's the answer to every question you have about him." He unfolded his hands and put them on his knees and looked at Judge Paulson with the clear, complete readiness of someone who has said exactly what they came to say and has nothing to add. Paulson looked at him for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "Thank you, Caleb." Caleb walked back to his seat. He sat down beside Sarah Mitchell, took Lily into his lap, and did not look at Stone. He did not need to. The recess lasted 40 minutes. Stone stood in the corridor with Patricia, who was going over notes with the focused efficiency of someone who had done everything available to be done, and was now in the phase of waiting for the world to decide. Marcus Wade stood nearby. Tom Mitchell brought water from a machine down the hall without being asked and handed it to everyone without comment. Connie Farrow walked past Stone in the corridor and stopped. Her husband was at the far end with their attorney. She looked at Stone directly. "He's extraordinary," she said. "Your boy." Stone looked at her. "He is." She held his gaze for a moment. Something moved through her expression. Not defeat, something more complicated. The specific grief of a good person who wanted something real and is beginning to understand that wanting it and deserving it are not the same as it being right. "Anna was stubborn," she said softly. Stone stared at her. "I knew her when she was young, before Gerald, before all of it." She paused. "She cut us off. I never fully understood why. But looking at that boy—" She stopped. Her voice had gone thin. "She raised him right. She raised him exactly right." She turned and walked back to her husband. Stone stood in the corridor and held that the understanding that Connie Farrow had just given him something he had not asked for and could not have manufactured. A piece of Anna Walker handed across a courthouse corridor by someone who had lost the right to know her but remembered her anyway. He thought she was really smart. She just got sick. He thought she went as far as she could. Patricia touched his arm. "They're calling us back."
What can say?
Judge Paulson took his seat and looked at the room for a moment before he spoke. It was the look of a man who has made a decision and is taking the measure of the weight of it before he sets it down. "I have reviewed all filings submitted to this court. I have considered the home study, the psychological evaluation, the character testimony, and the department's revised recommendation." He paused. "I have also heard this morning from a child whose capacity for clear moral thought is among the most remarkable I have encountered in this courtroom in 23 years on this bench." Gerald Farrow's hands visible on the table tightened. "The Farrow family has presented themselves as genuine and well-intentioned, and I believe that assessment to be accurate," Paulson continued. "Blood connection is a factor this court weighs seriously. However, the law also requires that the court weigh the nature and depth of existing relationships, the expressed and demonstrated needs of the children involved, and the character of the individuals seeking placement as reflected by their actions over time, not simply their history on paper." Stone breathed slowly. Beside him, Patricia was completely still. "Mr. Mercer's record is significant," Paulson said. "I will not pretend otherwise, and I would not insult this proceeding by dismissing it. What I will say is that a record documents a past, and that the evidence before this court from a licensed psychologist, from a county sheriff, from medical professionals, from a department supervisor with 2 decades of experience who revised a formal recommendation, and from a 6-year-old child who walked 2 days across the Arizona desert and knows precisely what he is asking for, constitutes a compelling and coherent portrait of a present." He picked up his glasses and put them on. "It is the order of this court that guardianship of Caleb and Lily Walker be assigned to Stone Mercer, effective immediately, pending the completion of the adoption process currently in progress. The Farrow family's application is respectfully denied. The court thanks them for their willingness to come forward and notes their genuine concern for the children's welfare." He looked up from the page. "We are adjourned." The gavel came down. For a single second, the room did nothing, held the decision the way a body holds a breath, and then the gallery moved. Wade's hand on Stone's shoulder. Patricia's voice saying something efficient and important that Stone did not process. Tom Mitchell's large, quiet presence at his back. Ruth from the diner making a sound he would have called undignified if it hadn't been exactly appropriate. And then Caleb was in front of him. The boy had crossed the room without running with the same measured walk, and he stood in front of Stone with Lily on his hip and looked up at him. His expression was the most unguarded Stone had ever seen it all. The frost gone, all the protective calculations set aside, the face of a child who has finally completely allowed himself to believe in the thing he has been fighting for. "We won," Caleb said. Stone got down on one knee, which his rebuilt joints noted, and he ignored, and he looked at both of them, at Caleb's clear, border-colored eyes, and at Lily, who grabbed his nose immediately with the unswerving confidence of a baby who has never doubted her welcome. "We won," Stone said. Caleb looked at him for one more moment. Then he put his free arm around Stone's neck and pressed his face against Stone's jaw, and Stone put his arms around both of them, Lily squirming and making sounds of protest at being between two people pressing together, and held them there in the middle of a county courthouse while the room moved around them. Stone did not look at the ceiling this time. He let it happen, all of it. The full weight of it, which was not heavy the way he had feared it, was the weight of something real, something solid, something that had been missing from his life so long he had stopped knowing it was absent. The adoption was finalized 4 months later on a morning in March. The same courthouse, a different energy, quieter, warmer. The bureaucratic machinery of the state being used for something it was designed for at its best. Judge Paulson was on the bench again, which Patricia had arranged because it mattered to have continuity, and he signed the final documents with the unhurried precision of a man who understands that some signatures mean more than others. Caleb stood beside Stone in front of the bench. Lily was in Stone's arms wearing a dress that Sarah Mitchell had brought, attempting to eat the collar of Stone's shirt with focused determination. "Caleb Walker," Judge Paulson said, "do you understand that this order makes Stone Mercer your legal father?" "Yes," Caleb said. "And is that what you want?" Caleb looked up at Stone, at the man who had stopped on a highway when 43 cars had not, who had sat in a plastic chair all night and drunk bad coffee and answered every question honestly and driven 320 miles every week for months and assembled a bookshelf in a spare bedroom and learned what a fever monitor sounded like and sat on the edge of a bed at 2 in the morning talking about ordinary things until a boy's breathing evened out. "That's what I want," Caleb said. Clear, clean, certain. His mother's son to the last syllable. Judge Paulson signed the paper. "Congratulations," he said, to the Mercer family. That evening in the house in Flagstaff, after Lily had been put to bed and had gone down with the deep, uncomplicated sleep of a child who feels safe, Stone sat on the edge of Caleb's bed. The bookshelf had books on it now. A full shelf accumulated over 4 months of Saturday visits and birthday gifts from Ruth, and choices Caleb had made himself at the used bookstore 2 blocks from the park. Caleb was not ready to sleep. He was sitting up against the headboard with his knees pulled up, looking at the middle distance with the thinking expression. "What are you thinking about?" Stone said. Caleb was quiet for a moment. "I'm thinking about that highway," he said. "I think about it sometimes. What would have happened if you hadn't stopped?" Stone said nothing. "I don't think about it in a scary way," Caleb said quickly. I think about how things are exactly what they are because of one moment, one decision." He looked at Stone. "You didn't even decide. You said your hand just moved." "That's right," Stone said. "My mom used to say that people show you who they are before they think about it." Caleb looked at the bookshelf. She was right about that too. Stone looked at him. He thought about all the miles behind them, the highway, the hospital, the diner, the courtroom, the plastic chair, the fractions at the kitchen table, the yard in Copper Ridge, the spare bedroom becoming a real room. The long, ordinary accumulation of mornings and Saturdays and phone calls that had built something neither of them had been looking for on the day they found each other. "Get some sleep," Stone said. Caleb slid down under the covers. Stone reached over and turned off the lamp. In the dark, Caleb said, "Stone." "Yeah." "You saved us." Stone sat in the dark for a moment. He thought about a man who had spent 12 years riding away from everything, who had not helped anyone in over a decade, who had 83 good reasons and 1 bad hand that moved before he could think about it. "You saved me too," he said. He meant it entirely. Caleb was quiet. His breathing began to slow and even out the way it always did. Steady, deepening the breathing of a child who has decided the night is safe. Stone sat there until it happened the way he always did, because that was the kind of father he was. Not the kind that was arranged, the kind that stopped. Outside, the Arizona night did what it did, immense, indifferent, full of stars and distance, and the empty highways where ordinary and extraordinary traded places without warning. Inside, 2 children slept, and Stone Mercer, a man once defined by what he had done and now defined by what he had chosen, stayed exactly where he was.